It's a little terrifying to be sitting next to Edward Norton, who I know best as a neo-Nazi or a schizophrenic domestic terrorist or a guy who turns green and enormous when angered. But he's here in a different role today as one of the founders of CrowdRise, which is using the power of social networks to raise funds for philanthropies and nonprofits that most need the money. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it. I'll try not to make you angry just in case.
Thanks.
So let's start by talking about how CrowdRise works, because it's a really fascinating concept. If I, just a regular guy, want to see what happens in Haiti, for instance, and I want to raise money for Haiti, how would I use CrowdRise to make that happen?
Well, I think the important thing to understand is that we've designed this with different kind of contextual frameworks in mind. I mean, in the sense that an individual may want to, in a self-starting way, have a robust platform or a tool or a utility for just in a self-motivated way backing a cause that they care about without any interaction with the organization itself. On the other hand, an organization may want a more cutting-edge way of reaching out and creating crowdsourced fundraising movements. What we've got up here is Hope for Haiti. This is really interesting because this is a case of an organization that didn't contact us in any way. This is kind of our model of how easy it is for an organization to use. They set this up without ever even connecting with us directly, and created a very creative campaign in which basically they asked their existing supporters to fundraise for them and offered a trip to Haiti to the list of people who hit a certain benchmark. So they took the assets of their organization in the sense that experience of going to Haiti was an asset, and we helped show them how to leverage that into an exciting, incentivized campaign.
So this is going to their people who are already committed to their cause and sort of saying, raise as much money as you can for us from your,
That's right.
However you can do it?
In the organizational context, one of the things we think that there's a lot of evidence of is that what a lot of these crowdsourcing tools offer is the chance to create multiples and leverage through your existing base of support. In other words, we don't obviously want to gum up the works between an organization and the people who already support them. But the people who already support an organization should be more than just donors. They are a 21st century network for fundraising, and they can often reach out and raise significant multiples of what they're able to donate themselves.
So those people would, for instance, put a post on Facebook or something and say, check out my CrowdRise page.
Yes, there are ways, we've designed it to be able to interact well with Facebook and Twitter and other social connectivity, but you don't actually need those. CrowdRise itself makes it very easy for you to just message directly to your contact lists.
Right, as you talk about it, it reminds me a little bit of the Obama campaign, back in '08. They had this sort of point system, which you guys have as well, which we'll get into later, and it was very much about putting challenges out there for people to meet.
Yeah, and I think was a very significant demonstration that affected a lot of us who are interested in these kinds of movement potentials, in the sense that he did that. I mean, a lot of people talked about how Obama got almost 70 million discrete donors and how many of them were under $100. But I actually thought what was less focused on, and was to me even more eye-opening, was the success that campaign had at just what we've talked about, saying if you can donate $25, fantastic, but if you can raise $250, even better. And lots of people did that. They got an incredible conversion rate on getting, especially young people who had limited capacity of their own, to go out and create for them multiples just through their passion and their interest.
And so this is a site for organizations to tap into some of that same power. And also for individuals, maybe without, as you were saying, without the involvement of the organizations.
Yeah, a great example, we had a 12-year-old girl who wanted to volunteer in hospitals. She wants to be a doctor. She couldn't, she was too young, and she read on her own about a floating hospital on Lake Tanganyika that goes around and services people in very poor communities. She went on CrowdRise on her own, set up that organization as the beneficiary of her project, and raised, she may be up to like $4,000 now, I'm not sure. She was 13 years old, and she did it by really creatively and intelligently messaging to her own network. And I think yeah, here she is, Julia. Yeah, look at, 8,000. I'm sorry, I gave her half the credit she deserved. She's 13 years old. She's raised $8,300 for an organization that had in no way had any prior contact with her. So,
That's amazing.
So I think, this is an incredible demonstration of the capacity of a very young person who's conversant with these tools, with this kind of communicating, to go out and do something very significant.
Now, we just saw a presentation from Yancey Strickler from Kickstarter, who was showing some of the videos that people have posted and some of the ways that people have gone out to try to raise funds for their projects. Are you seeing similar kind of creative efforts?
Absolutely, yeah. Everything from Will Ferrell creating a suntan lotion with himself naked on it that you get if you donate to through his page, to we've seen.
It costs more for him not to send it to you.
It does. It's we've seen a woman who is set up. She hasn't launched her campaign yet, but we've seen that she set up that she's going to water ski around Manhattan, and to benefit medical care for Iraq veterans.
Wow.
And I think we, not unlike Kickstarter, I think CrowdRise has a very robust capability of supporting a lot of creativity in terms of the way you envision your own fundraising, and we think, importantly, a lot of fun. We think it needs to be fun. It's very, very important that a new generation of people starts to connect with this kind of activity as something that's not cool. That's too easy a word, but fun, life expanding, pulls on their skills, their creativity, creates new connections and friendships. One of my favorite stories in our first, 9 months of operating this site was that because of the point system, which you talked about, and people who were building a lot of points on CrowdRise.
We should just explain that really quickly.
Yeah.
This is like a Foursquare kind of thing where people can.
Yeah, we created a virtual point system that as people take actions, raise money, create new projects, they get different points, they can award each other points for cool projects. It's all completely virtual, but and they start to get titles as they mount through the point system. But people following each other's points, it tends to make people check out each other's projects. And in one case, we had 2 women, one in the UK and one in the United States, who, because they were competing with each other on points, they looked at each other's projects. One got involved with the others, and they became such good friends that they've now both gotten a CrowdRise tattoo on their ankle.
Oh my
which
gosh.
we thought was
Wow.
we thought was a significant demonstration of our user loyalty.
It's always a big moment when you get your first tattoo.
Yes.
Yeah. So, over the last couple of years, in the wake of everything that's happened in the Middle East, the Green Revolution, all of these things, there's been a lot of talk about, there's a New Yorker story, a famous New Yorker story by Malcolm Gladwell, about, how deep are social networks really? Gladwell's argument was that it favors a sort of superficial kind of connection that does not result in, deep, sustained involvement. And it's easy enough to push a button and donate money, but how do you turn that into a real relationship and something that's deeper?
Well, I have a couple of problems with that. For one, I think it's very premature. I think that we were talking about it backstage. I'm connecting it to Wired, which I'm a fan of. I really like Kevin Kelly's books, Out of Control and What Technology Wants. I think articulated some really fantastic things about technological phenomenon and the idea of emergence theory and how difficult it is to predict what the actual emergent phenomenon is going to be in the very moment right before it happens. And I think that what we've watched already with social networking to a certain degree is that each time the cognoscenti kind of sort of try to pin down what the limits of its potential are, they're proved wrong in the next 5 minutes, whether in terms of scale of users, valuation as a company, profitability, or I think too in assessing too quickly what are the impacts of these things, because they're maturing and evolving at such an incredible rate that I think I think it's foolish to try to, it's presumptuous to make that assessment right now. And I think already there's a lot of evidence that flies in the face of that. I would flip back to someone like the girl Julia. There's a 13-year-old girl who is using the kind of the game theory of social networking that she's obviously already grown up in to achieve something that's the definition of substantive. She's identified something happening in the world that she wants to engage with, has no money to give on her own, and has raised such a substantial amount of money that the organization is reaching back out to her to cultivate this child as a potent supporter of what they do. If that's not a substantive relationship being formed, then I don't know what is.
Right.
And I think that you know, people have a tendency to focus on the fact that Facebook and Twitter, which are in essence at their core social narratives, you know, those are platforms for personal identity narrative. Facebook is this is my life as defined by who my friends are. Twitter's this is my life as defined by what I'm doing right now.
Right.
But I think that as this will continue to mature and differentiate, and new niche platforms in social networking will form, which is what we thought a lot about this with CrowdRise, because we didn't want it to be what we called sort of a use and drop utility. We wanted it to be a personal narrative platform where you anchor your life, you anchor your activist life. And I think that you know, we wanted to add to the chain with Facebook, Twitter, these things, so that you have a Facebook page that you socialize on, but you have a CrowdRise page, because this is where, in a long-term sense, you affect the world, and instead of doing it and then it going away, it maintains this long-term aggregating narrative of what you've done, so that you can see your impact growing over time.
Right. So where Facebook builds a narrative around who your friends are, and Twitter builds a narrative around what you're doing, CrowdRise builds a narrative around what you care about.
What you care about,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
This is my life as defined by how I'm trying to change the world.
Now, we talked a little bit about this backstage as well. You know, traditionally the way a lot of nonprofits and charities have worked is by identifying the highest value donors and going after those guys.
Yeah.
This raises the possibility of, again, in a sort of Obama-esque turn, opening that network up to millions of smaller donors.
Yes.
How does that change the way an organization runs? How does that change the sort of what's the impact of that?
Well, I think that you know, macro philanthropy is never going to go away, especially as we see increasing wealth stratification. You're going to have more and more of the Gates Foundation. You know, big donors is a great thing, and it's never going to go away. I think there's this emergent phenomenon of crowdsourced fundraising. There's always been grassroots fundraising, and organizations have always tried to figure out how to create grassroots bases. But I think that what this has the potential to do is drastically reduce the inefficiency of other forms of fundraising. We all know, anyone involved with organizations knows that fundraising is terribly inefficient. That's the dirty secret of it, is that most of these organizations are spending between 20 and 40% development costs, or you go to a rubber chicken dinner and Sheryl Crow plays and you give your money and they say, we raised $1 million tonight. They didn't. They spent $500,000 to mount that event. It's a horrendously inefficient way to raise money. Crowdsourced fundraising is generally coming in at under 8% costs, and the truth is that it's more often paid by the donor and not the organization. So the argument can be made that this is zero cost basis fundraising, and I think that I not only don't think they're mutually exclusive, or that I think they're very complementary in the sense that if you look at things like, we ran a campaign with the Red Cross, they got a macro philanthropist grant for the Japan relief. This family, the Ogawa family, gave $500,000 as a match campaign. And the Red Cross came to us and said, we assume we'll make this match mostly through large checks, but we'd love to do some of it crowdsourced. And we raised over 50% of the match through small donations in less than 3 weeks. So again, the capacity of creative forms of crowdsourced fundraising to leverage macro philanthropy and actually create connectivity between the people with that kind of capacity and other people who want to be involved is really strong, I think.
That's amazing. I feel like we could talk about this for as quickly as we're talking.
Yeah.
There's so much more to talk about. We're running a little long, but I do want to make an announcement that last night Wired started a campaign on CrowdRise. We're donating money to Khan Academy. I don't know, are people here familiar with Khan Academy? Sal Khan, it's a series of online educational videos. They're really amazing. They're kind of revolutionizing education. This is an incentivized campaign. So anyone who donates $34, we hope you'll donate more. Anyone watching out there, but anyone who does give $34 is entered into a contest to win an iChat with Edward Norton.
So this is, I think it's a good example, and it's great you guys are doing this. It's great. We think that there's enormous capacity for not just organizations themselves. You know, there are nonprofit organizations who are often the beneficiaries, but there are also other communities, corporate organizations, journalists, or so Wired is a community. It's an entity, and you guys have the capacity, I think, to expand and redefine your own vision of corporate impact, corporate social responsibility, a company, and its reach into its community. And I think this is great. You guys have picked something organic to your own kind of core mission. And I think what we launched, I think it's actually gone up $200 since I walked in the door. But but this is a good example because, for instance, the first thing we threw in there of winning the iChat with me, that's just one of things we'll work with Wired on. Wired obviously, a year's subscription to Wired for anyone who does,
Sure.
Enter $18 in the next 18 hours and you'll be entered to win a 2-year subscription to Wired. You know what I mean? I mean, you can take the assets.
I think it costs about $18.
Yeah, lunch with Kevin Kelly. You know what I mean? I mean, however, there are so many things that you guys can offer in a way to incentivize your core readership to get engaged in a fun way in a cause that you support. And I think we'll have really great success with this.
That's great. And by the way, I should say that anyone who doesn't know about Khan Academy should check out the August issue of Wired. It's coming out in about a month. So, Edward, this was really great. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Really
Thanks a lot.
fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Fun to talk.
That was great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.